Hey everyone, Eggman here with another video. Today we have a top 16 breakdown for the Latin American 2024 finals for the One Piece card game. This happened this past weekend and it was a really large event, and I'm really happy to go over these results too. So before we get started though, if you guys are new to the channel, please make sure to hit that like and subscribe. It really does help, and we are going to be doing a lot more One Piece content in the future, so you don't want to miss it either. So also, if you guys want any of the deck lists we're talking about, you can check out my website Eggman Events, which is linked in the description. We have top 16s since that is what Song Events was able to release, but there was a day 2 top 64 cut. So if you guys also have any deck list that I don't have currently and you want that on the page, please let me know. I'd like to update this and keep this as accurate as possible. Chances are, watching this video, this page is already outdated, so you can check out the page once again linked in the description. But this was a 2-day event hosted by Song Events, 1,500 plus players, 10 rounds of Swiss best of 1, and then there's also live stream day 1 and 2, which I linked in the description and you can find on the page as well. And of that top 16, we did have 6 copies of Doflamingo, 5 copies of Stardeck 13 Luffy, 2 copies of Purple Luffy, 1 Shanks, 1 Enel, and 1 Bonney as well, which there were a lot of different decks that were able to make it in day 2, but I'm really surprised there were no Rob Lucci in the top 16. There were some in the top 32 and some in the top 64, but no copies in the top 16, which is pretty remarkable in my mind. Also, if we look at my current tier list for this one too, I'd say it's pretty accurate. Rob Lucci not getting in top 16, I think, was remarkable. We also did have a Nell, which was able to get a 3rd place finish, which I think is batting a little high for it, so that's pretty cool to see there too. No Namis, as far as I know, in the top 64 at all. We did have a single Blackbeard, as far as I know. There might be more from that as well. And then the only other things I would mention is that we did have 2 copies of Nico Robin, and then one leader that wasn't really on my radar was a Reiju, which was able to get a top 32 finish as well. So we'll go over that deck list as well when we get there. But last thing I want to say is that I watched out to all of the US players who were able to do well this weekend too. There's a bunch in the top 8 of Swiss, and they're able to get there. So that includes Holden Miller getting a 4th place finish, top 8 from Eric Quintana. We also have Jonas, who's able to get a top 16 finish as well. And then also we have Jackson Huang, Ernesto, our AwakenedTCG, our Michael, and Cross, all getting into top 64. So there's likely some I missed, and I might just not have their list right now. But I think that's a really good showing, and congrats to those players as well. But we're going to jump on into our deck breakdown by leader. We're going to start off with our first place list, which is Néstor's version of Shanks. So Shanks has been just weirdly topping a lot, right? Like, there's not a lot of people who are on Shanks from in the top 64, and then it still is able to kind of sneak these wins a lot, which I think is really interesting. So this one's running more of the Red Hawk package, so we are playing 4 of these. There's kind of like a bit of a spectrum of, do you play 0 Red Hawk, 4, or some kind of like hybrid with 2 or so, but this just has a lot of removal with that package in general. We are also playing more removal centric stuff as well, so 4 Beckman, also 2 copies of Edward Newgate, 4 copies of Silvers, which is really strong for not only getting some removal but also preventing like a stronger attack in the next turn, which I think is notable. And then also 3 Dragons and 3 Shanks, as well as 1 copy of Goldie Roger. So a pretty good mix of cards, I think. And I think Shanks is still, it's just kind of like in a weird position where you can win a lot of matchups, but you can also lose a lot of matchups. There's just kind of a lot of 50-50, and it really depends on if you find your curve at the right time. If you find, you have so many different option cards that are great in specific spots, but if you just don't happen to have that card in your hand, you're in a bit of a tough spot. But I think this is a really cool deck. It's been kind of just doing well in general, I think, in this meta, and it's just been weird. Like, usually there's not a lot in the top 16, but the one that does gets like 1st or 2nd place, which is really interesting. So this is Néstor's build, and congratulations for their 1st place finish, and good luck on their Worlds run later in March as well. And then going into 2nd place, and also top 4 in general, we have 2 copies of Doflamingo, so their 2nd place with Wild's version, and also Holden's Miller right here with 4th place too. So not a lot of differences between these two. As you can see, it's pretty much the exact same cards with just different ratios. So Doflamingo's not a big kind of the deck building choice when you get to it, right? We pretty much know all the cards that are viable for it. There's just some that you put in and out depending on who you are. Mostly I think like Red Rock is like the biggest option card if you want to play a copy of that or not. I've seen some people not play Jozu or play a couple copies of Jozu, but other than that, the deck is pretty solid and cemented for that. So there's just some ratios. Pudding's usually a card that you play somewhere between 2 to 4 copies. Teach, I see people just cemented that this is a good card and play 3 or 4 copies of this guy. And then honestly, the one thing I will notice is that compared to a lot of other regions, most people that got into top 64 played like 1 copy of Kaya. This card was pretty popular at 1 copy in a lot of different builds, which is kind of unusual for me compared to other regions and other builds I've been seeing of Doflamingo. So there's not a lot to say about. Congratulations to our top 4 Dofi players. And not too surprising. It's definitely more of a player-centric deck than necessarily a deck builder's deck there. So there we go there. Jumping into the end of the top 4, we do have Mateo's version of Enel. And again, this was something that, a lot of people theorycraft like, oh, it's really good against Doflamingo. It's something that that matchup was really tough for you. So if you saw Doflamingo for most of the weekend, which looking at top 4, you likely did, this deck can do a really, really good job at beating that matchup specifically and having maybe a rough time against some others too. So I think like it is pretty lopsided when it comes to its matchups, but being good against the best deck in the game, at least the most popular leader in the game right now, does have its merits too. So some different kind of tech options for this one. We are playing 4 copies of the Nami, but we're not playing the Rocket Luffy, which I thought was really interesting. We have our big top end of Katakuri, Yamato, as well as Porteous D Ace for the top end, nothing too crazy. We do have a new card from OP09, which is the Dirashi, which does let us draw 2 cards. Generally, we just don't have anything to do on our 3 Dawn play anyways, so just being able to potentially get some cards. I am really surprised we're not playing Rocket Luffy if we're playing this card, since it does have a trigger, so you are able to find it, but I digress. I also have been seeing this Kuzan pop up a little bit more often too. So on play, please play one of your opponent's characters with cost of 3 or less at the top or bottom of your opponent's life face up. Your opponent trashes 1 card from their hand. So I think this has a lot of different great tools for it, including a pretty good card for Black Yellow Luffy. This makes them discard a card, but also you can kind of mess up their life. So if they don't have a way to remove like a 1-drop from their life or something like that, this can get a lot of value and kind of screw up their plays. So I think this is a good tech for a lot of matches, but specifically Black Yellow Luffy. There's also some times where you might need some removal of like a Teach or something for a Doflamingo matchup, so that can be helpful for you too. And it's an interesting card that's been popping up that I do think is notable. So other than that, I think we know what this deck looks like. It's been pretty present since release, a year ago. We've just been kind of incrementally adding new cards as we get them, and I think Enel's like in an interesting spot, but if you are feeling confident against Doflamingo, and if you're also using tech cards that can help us against Black Yellow Luffy, which was, as mentioned, like a majority of the top 16, I am not too surprised that we were able to get a top 4 finish, but it wasn't on my bingo card per se. So this is, again, the build from Mateo. Congratulations for their finish with Enel. And then breaking into the top 18, top 8, we've got 2 different Black Yellow Luffys that were able to get top 8. We do have Andy's version as well as Eric's version of it here. And this is kind of like Doflamingo, right? We know what the core of this deck looks like, right? We've got to play our 2-drop Luffy, our 2-drop Sabo. We have to play our Kuzans. We have to play our 5-drop Luffys and Sabos, right? Some people play the 5-drop Stardeck 13 Sabos. Some people don't. And there's kind of been like a rotating amount of tech cards that have been existing that I've been seeing a lot of. So we've got like Raigo, which has been our Kingdom Come, which has been pretty common at a couple copies right now in this meta, especially to help us against like Blackbeard. But the kind of key cards I've been noticing are we've got like Emporio. People play at this at like 1 or 2 copies. We have like Shirahoshi, which most people have been using instead of like an Ice Age to be a blocker, but also being able to get a minus cost, so you can use like a Monkey.D.Luffy to get rid of an 8 cost, which Gecko Mori is an 8 cost, and there's a lot of other good 8 costs too. And then we've also been seeing the Nami as well, this coming out in Stardeck 14. This being just like a really good card in like the mirror match. It does like get you card advantage. You can use it with Sabo to be like a 7k leader that also draws you a card kind of thing. So depending on the board state, if 2 blockers and 7k leaders just better, there's just good spots for that, which is nice. and that's kind of where it is. So that's like we have like 4 or 5 tech card options. Most people kind of use it with blockers or like an extra copy of Sabo, but it's been known for what this deck looks like at kind of peak performance in OP09 too. So definitely, again, kind of like Doflamingo, this is a very difficult deck to play, I think, at 100%, and it's very pilot center. I would also argue this deck is harder to play than Doflamingo a lot of the time, and it's very tough. But when you're able to figure it out and play well, you're in a really good spot. So these are the builds from, again, Andy and Eric there, and congratulations for their top 8 finish there. And then next up, we've got Purple Luffy. So this is Yuakin's version of the deck here. And I've been really enjoying like the Purple Straw Hat package in general in this meta. I think it's very strong, and there's a lot of great ways to utilize it. And for this one too, like this is a pretty solid package for the deck as well. So we do have like 4 copies of Orjuro, 4 copies of the Songoro, and then we have like the Uses Kid, which is really good, especially if we have to go first and kind of, or sorry, if we have to go second. Generally, you want to go first with this deck, but like in the mirror match, being able to establish a Uses Kid can get you a lot of advantage and maybe help you win that that kind of down pair matchup for you. We also have like our Sanjis. The 7-drop has been really strong. Just because like sometimes you don't have Luffy Taro or you don't have like the good cards to pair with it. So having a 7k with Rush, this also can help you end some games too. Having 2 copies of this and also 4 copies of Uso Hachi means you have so many ways to just get rid of blockers and kind of go for game. We also have the 9-drop Linland, which I've been really enjoying this card in this meta right now. Great against like Doflamingo and getting you some more defense cards and just buying you some extra turns, which is nice. And then the 9-drop Secret Rare Luffy. This card's a menace. If you're able to ramp into it and play it immediately, your opponent can't, like 10k attacks every turn adds up very, very quickly. So it's great for trying to end the game. So we do have the 4 copies of Gum Gum Giant. Fantastic card that definitely kind of breaks the deck. And then we also have the Slow Beam. This is definitely a tech choice, but it does catch a lot of people off guard. Counter Don -1 up to one of your leaders. Our characters gains plus 2k power during this battle. Then rest up to one of your opponent's characters, regardless of anything. So this can definitely catch your opponent off guard. I'm sure they were able to do very well. And maybe sneak a win because your opponent didn't play around this card correctly. And also the trigger for it's not too bad either. So being able to get that extra ramp for it. But I think Purple Luffy's in a good spot. It's been very popular lately. It is a little bit of like, did you find your good curve? Yes, cool. If not, you're a little bit behind. But it's been a really good and strong deck in this meta too. So this is Yuakin's version. Congratulations for their top there. And then next up, we've got Bonney. And so this is our last unique deck in the top 16. And Bonney's just been kind of around, I think, since releasing OP07. It's never been the best deck, but it's been just generically just a medium deck, right? It tops most events, not at like a great number. It does usually kind of have like the Shanks effect too, where it's more or less like it will top, and usually there's like one player who gets like in top 4 with it, and then like there's not a lot left in the top 16. But if you have a good day with this deck and you're really well versed with your matchups, you can do very, very well in a lot of spots. So nothing really new. In fact, we've got something more old than new. We do see 2 copies of the starter deck 2 Uses Captain Kid, which came out like 2 years ago. It's a blocker, but also Dawn times 1 end of your turn, set this character to active. So sometimes this is like a good card for the fact that you can attack with it and then still have a blocker up, which I think is nice. And I could see it in a variety of matchups. You could be kind of good with it. We don't play Basil Hawkins, so it looks like a replacement for Basil for a deck like this one. But I think it was like really interesting to see this card after, again, so long that we haven't seen it in a really, really long time. So other than that, we do have like 3 copies of Hody Jones, 3 copies of the Uses Captain Kid, the 8-drop, which is a little bit more popular than the 7-drop, 4 copies of the 9-cop Shanks, and then 4 copies of Doflamingo too. So just a lot of just our top end we try to get there. It's kind of like Shanks has mentioned, like you do kind of have to just see your pieces, but if you do, you're in a really good spot if you have that tempo with it. And yeah, I don't think Bonney's going anywhere anytime soon. Again, it's not going to be the most popular deck, but it is something that's present in this meta, and it's something that you have to definitely prepare for. So this is David's version of the build, and congratulations for their finish there. All right, and then next up we've got Rob Lucci. So this is our first one, and this is 707's version of the deck. And again, not getting to the top 16 with Rob Lucci, I think, was really remarkable, especially since it was 2 copies of our top 4 here in North America. And this deck's been around again as OP07. It's been a little bit more popular than Bonney, and I think definitely one of these 3 strongest decks in this meta right now. There's not many changes we've made with the release of OP09. No new cards for it, but we do have some more kind of tech options for the meta. Specifically, I think more people are playing a copy or 2 of Soap Sheep, since it does work really well with our 4-drop Rob Lucci and Leader effect. We're able to get rid of 2 4-drops, which is really relevant against something like a Doflamingo matchup. We are also playing like the Jack at 3 copies and the Gecko Mori at 4 copies. You'll see other Rob Lucci builds be using like the 9-drop Kaido as well. So I think that's something that's still good in this meta too. And then for Rebecca's, obviously 2 Sabos, and I've been seeing Hina pop up at like 1 or 2 copies a little bit more often as well, since this does work really well with our leader effect and can help us get some good removal. It's just kind of like, if you want to think of it like an extra copy of like Ice Age and Tempest Kick, which we're maxing out at copies of this. So just a lot of cost reduction you'll see in a build like this too. So there are also some weird turns, like if you're at 6 Dawn, you can play Brook. You play Hina and then you play Brook, and then you can get rid of a 5 cost, which is really nice. Or technically 6 cost with Rob Lucci. So that I think comes up. I think a lot of people are playing like 5 costs to try to get around like Trafalgar Law's Bounce and Doflamingo. So being able to snipe that pretty effectively, I think, is good too. So Rob Lucci's a pretty known deck, I think, at this point. I don't have much more to say, but congratulations to David for their 707 with their finish there. The next up, we've got the Nico Robin. So we did have 1 in the top 32 and 1 in the top 64, and they're pretty different. All things considered. So the first one is MemoBunker's version of the build, which is running a little bit of purple, right? And I think you kind of, I don't know, whenever I play this deck, people are like, why am I not playing Gum Gum Giant? This card is broken. It's the best card in the game. You need to play it at 4 copies. And then also, if we look at, the version from Jonathan, you don't even have to run purple cards, right? This can be just a mono yellow deck if you really want it to be too, which I think is funny. So, but yeah, we obviously have some new cards for this deck that came out of OP09. We do have like the 6 cost Nico Robin from OP09. On play, if your opponent has 3 or more life, trash up to 1 card from the top of your opponent's life cards. And then also this being able to trigger and play a cost 3 character from your hand is really nice. So that can be like a Nico Olivia, which gives a plus 3k power to the turn. There's also, like, you can play a Brûlé, which also plays off a life, or also a Jaguar D Soul, which I think is strong too. We're not playing the Darashi in this deck, which I thought was interesting and noteworthy too. And I don't think we're only playing, we're not playing in either version of these builds, which is really remarkable too. And I definitely want to try out these decks in a little bit as well. But just some interesting builds. We are playing like 7 cost Sanji as our top end, or kind of like medium end, to be able to like get some pressure and like attack on board, which I think is good. We're not playing any Uso Hachi or any 1-drop Trafalgar Laws though, which I thought was interesting. We are playing 4 copies of Yamato and Ace, which is just great cards to kind of be worth to ramp into. You kind of use these effects to just kind of pressure our opponents. So I think this is like a really different build than any build that I've really been trying, which is interesting. And then the mono yellow build, the only other difference is that we are playing like 4 copies of the 6-drop Newgate, which I love this card. I think this card is really good. And just being able to rearrange our life and also get some cycle is very, very strong in a deck like this. We are also playing like Kiko Nojo, Frankie. I don't think we're playing Kiko Nojo in the other build, no, which is again very remarkable. There's a lot of cards that I would argue were pretty good cards and almost staples in this deck that just aren't being played, which I thought was really interesting. And then I think that's really it. We just kind of have our top, and we're not playing Gum Gum Giant, which I don't think the card is as necessary as like other purple Straw Hat leaders, but I don't know. I still feel remiss not playing like a copy or 2 in it, because I feel like it's just such a good card in a lot of ways. So I don't know. I really like Nico Robin. I've been playing a lot of like other purple Straw Hat leaders currently, but maybe I need to give it another shot. Seeing 2 copies in the top 64 in such a large event, like the largest person event in an OP09 meta, and 2 of them getting to day 2. Definitely something worthy about the deck, and something that's worth, I think, another look at. So congratulations to MemoBunker and Jonathan for their finishes there, and we'll have to see if I do some more testing with Nico Robin in the future. And then we have Reiju in the top 32, which I currently do not know the name of this player. I promise I checked as much and tried to get the name of it, but I did not get the player. So if you know who this is, let me know so I can update it on the video as well as on the website. But Reiju was not on my contention for a top 32 finish for an event like this, and I think it's really remarkable to see it get into the top 32. So there's really no new cards for this deck from OP09, and even like in OP08, right? We didn't really get any new cards outside of like Black Maria. We taking advantage of like the getting the Dawn back is really strong, since we can be kind of aggressive with playing on our Vinsmoke cards, and we can play Vinsmoke Judge more consistently later in the game, so I think that comes up quite a bit. We are still playing like the Porsche package too, which is really good with the Tony Chopper. But yeah, this is kind of a deck that just has issues with how much room is dedicated to its archetype, and you don't have that much room for tech cards. But we did find room for a couple. We did have 2 copies of Red Rock and also 1 copy of the Gravity Blade Raging Tiger. So it's definitely a card that Raging Tiger being able to be good against like Black Yo Luffy, or also against like a Doflamingo that went wide. Those are really good cards too, and I think like this deck always has like a chance to win when you're able to just kind of chain your Ichis. If you're able to find like 2 back-to-back really early in the game, you get a lot of pressure, especially if you played a Porsche early. It's just like you have no consistency to see that every time, right? Especially with the Porsche not being searchable and just having to hard draw that card. But again, this deck is I don't know, it's a fun deck. I think it's a deck that will keep popping up every once in a while, even though like there's no real change with it. There's just a lot of dedicated players who only like playing this deck, and I think that's really cool too. So I don't have much more to say about this one, but congratulations to a Reiju player for their top 32 finish. And then to finalize it, we have Ernesto's, our AwakenedTCG's version of Marshall.D.Teach. So Marshall.D.Teach does not have room for a lot of tech options, but we did find room for a little bit of it with the Dragon Claw. So this is a counter up to one of your leaders. Our characters gain plus 4k power during this battle. Then if you have 15 or more cards in your trash, KO up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 4 or less. So honestly, we get so much cards in our trash so consistently with Teach, especially like Rob Lucci mills a lot, right, and other cards, but they generally have to put cards from their trash back into their deck. This deck, I feel like, gets to 10, 15 cards into our trash very quickly. So you are kind of able to take advantage of some of these kind of Dressrosa techs that are able to, you have 10, X amount of cards in your trash to be able to get advantage of it. That's also why I've been seeing people play like Tempest Kick, because you are able to get the card draw and the -3, which comes up quite a bit too. We also do have like the Finger Pistol and Black Hole to be able to get some removal, which is strong, and then obviously our top end with 10-drop Teach. So again, like we don't have like a lot of room for new cards in a build like this. You usually have like 2 to 5 kind of flex spots for this deck for some new cards, since I think most of this is cemented. But I do think the Dragon Claw is really interesting, and I think no doubt like it took a lot of people off guard to be hit by that, I think the first time too. So in general, I like Teach. I think it's going to be around. You do have to respect it. I don't think it's going to be as around as first expected into this meta, but I know a lot of people are kind of falling into the groove of how to play it correctly, and it's definitely a menace when it's able to see its pieces and kind of lock you out of playing the game too. So this is the build here from Ernesto, and congratulations for their top 64 finish. And that's going to be it for this one. I know I did a lot of rambling, but again, I think this meta is pretty good. I think this pie chart's a little bit deceptive about how open the meta is, and this is kind of more of just like a top 16 supercut. But I am interested to see what the rest of this meta kind of looks like too. So that's going to be it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you all next time.